This month we're going to talk about note-taking and the Backchannel. So we'll talk about some note-taking apps and then microblogging and chat applications. Now, we did miss our copyright last month because of a snow day, but we won't have time for it this month. We have a guest speaker that is coming in to speak to us about Twitter and how she uses it for professional development and to get things into her library. She's had a lot of author speakers come into her library via Skype and things like that because of interacting with them on Twitter. So she's going to give us a lot of examples how she uses that. So because of that, we won't have time to get into copyright. I'm also not going to talk about the note-taking apps when we meet, especially since not all of us have an iPad, but I am going to show you the note-taking apps in this video, so you can explore them more on your own. What we will talk about when we meet is Twitter and then some other items that can capture the back channel. And I'll explain what the back channel is as we get more in this video. So the reason we think note-taking is important because it can help avoid plagiarism, help students avoid plagiarism. When they take notes, a lot of times students kind of forget if they quoted something or if it was their idea after reading something. And that can lead to plagiarism because they might not realize it was a quote and they will put it into their paper as if it was their idea. And so I don't think that they are intentionally doing things. It just can be by accident because they didn't take good notes. So this is one thing we want to talk about just a little bit because you want to help students to try to avoid plagiarism at all costs. So some of these note-taking tips, they are from Purdue's OWL page. OWL is Online Writing Lab, and they give a lot of great examples on how to do note-taking. So do things like put a Q next to a quote, or of course use quotation marks. When an idea is taken from a source, put a big S next to it. So if you paraphrase something, put a big S next to it, but just put the word me next to your own ideas. And the biggest thing, this is coming from a librarian, the biggest thing is that you need to record relevant documentation. What book or article is this from? Do you have the URL for it? And I say this because I see students, they contact me all the time saying, I quoted something, but I don't remember where it was from now. I have this great quote, but I don't have the author, the title, the journal, nothing. And they want my help in trying to track it down. And only about 50% of the time can you usually find it. And maybe that's even a large percentage. It's pretty hard to find some of those things if all you have is a quote from inside of a paper. So the most important thing is to record relevant documentation. Now there are some note-taking apps that can help students. Like I said, we won't show these in person, so I'm just going to give you, I have some screenshots on the next few slides that show what this tool does. And this is PaperPort Notes. This is a free note-taking app. It allows you to take notes with your finger or with a stylus on your iPad. You can also type notes. You can also dictate the notes where you speak and it will type it for you. You can also highlight or draw in anything, and then you can also take audio notes. So audio notes, it won't dictate what you're saying, but it's just a little audio file attached to a note. One thing I really like about it is that you can take notes on top of PDFs or other documents. So you can pull other documents into PaperPort Notes and take notes on top of them. And then you can also share your notes that you take via email, Google Drive, Dropbox, and others. So when you get into PaperPort Notes, this screenshot's a little older. The toolbar up at the top looks a little different now. It's just a different color. Everything is in the exact same spot. So I didn't take a new screenshot because everything's in the same spot, as you'll see here. But this is what it looks like where you can take notes with your finger or a stylus. You can also zoom in to take notes with your finger. So the top note in blue, it was zoomed out and then I zoomed in. If you zoom in, you can write more notes then. Or you can type out your text and you can even highlight. And you use all the icons on the top toolbar on the right-hand side to do all these things. You tap on the big T to type your text. You click on the pencil to write your text with a stylus or your finger. You click on the highlighter to highlight text, and then you click on the eraser to erase it. And the eraser only erases text, like highlighted text and text that you write out with a stylus or your finger. It doesn't erase the typed text. If you want to erase the typed text, you just tap on it again to get your cursor, and then you can just backspace. So those are some of the basics with it, but there's a few other things it can do. The little microphone, that allows you to record your audio recordings. So that won't dictate, but it gives you an audio recording. So you'd have a little recording attached to the note. And then when you pull items into PaperPort Notes, this is a PDF I pulled into it, you can then highlight or write on top of it, or the box that I put there, you can even type on top of it. So you can really interact with any other document inside here. And this is what I like a lot, that I can highlight things in a certain document. Now here's a newer screenshot. You can see the toolbar at the top. It's just a different color, but otherwise everything's in the same spot. And this shows how to dictate. So if you tap on the T at the top, which pulls up your keyboard for you to type, you can also, instead of typing, click on Tap and Speak. And Tap and Speak is the dictating tool. So when you speak, it will type out what you're saying. And you have to give it the punctuation, and it's not always the best with proper nouns or place names, but you can always edit anything that you dictate afterwards too. Just put the cursor where you need to edit the item. I don't have any more screenshots or PaperPort Notes. It does do a few more things, but one great way for you to find out how to use this is to use their user guide. If you just click on Menu and then Help, you'll see the user guide, and it's a fabulous user guide showing how to use this tool. So I highly recommend you check that out to see some of the other features, or to get a review of some of those features I just showed you. Another iPad app that you might be interested in is a very, very simple one. This is Dragon Dictation. And you may have seen commercials for Dragon Dictation. Dragon Dictation actually is a really large dictation system if you want to pay for it. But they make this very simple free app that you can use. This one, you just speak into it and it will type out what you say. You do have to give it the punctuation again, and it's not always the best with proper names and place names. But it's a very, very simple tool that can help you dictate if you need it. It then allows you to share it via email or social media, or you can copy and paste it into some other notes. So I only have one screenshot to show because this is pretty much how simple Dragon Dictation is. You open it up and click on the red button to start recording, and you tap it to finish. After you finish, it will plug the text in that you said, so you don't see your text at the same time as you're saying it, but you just say everything you want and then it will pop your text in. After you finish, you can click on the keyboard icon on the bottom and you can edit your text. And then the buttons on the top right corner are how you make a new note with the plus button, use the trash can to delete a note, or use that arrow pointing down icon, the share icon, to share the note or copy it. And that's pretty much what Dragon Dictation does. There's not a whole lot more to it, so I know you'll be able to go into it and figure out how to use it. So those are just a couple note-taking applications that might be useful for you and or your students. So play around with them and give us a blog post about what you think about some of those applications. But now I'm going to talk about the Backchannel. So the Backchannel, what that is, those are the sidebar discussions that are happening in a classroom or during conferences or meetings. And you've seen this. Students in your class are whispering to each other as you're speaking at the front. I see this when I come talk to you. You all are whispering to each other about certain things. I see you pointing at each other's screens, that kind of thing. And the question is, can these conversations add to the overall discussion? Now we know some of these conversations are jokes or they're not on topic. I mean, I know that when I come visit you guys too, and you know that with your students as well, that not all the conversations in the Backchannel are on topic. But there are some that are on topic, and can what those students are saying add to the discussion? Can what you all are kind of pointing at each other to on your computers and talking about, can that add to our discussion? So the whole idea is, how can we capture those Backchannel discussions that can add to the whole discussion as a whole for the whole class? Now, the Backchannel can also help with note-taking, because it could be a way, or capturing the Backchannel could help with note-taking, because it could be a way to have kind of group notes. We know that 40% of classroom lecture and discussion is captured in an average student's notes. That statistic is always out there. Sometimes they say it's less than 40%, sometimes they say 20 to 30%, but we know they're not capturing all of the lecture and discussion in their own notes. So if you kind of take notes together, will that help the students? There are some different things that can capture the back channel. Microblogging and chat platforms can do this. Microblogging is what people call Twitter. It's when you post small pieces of information, commentary, links, photos on the internet. And you can do that via Twitter. And then Today's Meet and Simple Meet are some chat platforms where they can quickly and easily make you a chat room where everyone can be in there taking notes based upon what you're doing in the classroom. Now, some microblogging and chat services, they limit the amount of characters you can type per thing you type. Like Twitter limits you to 140 characters per tweet. Today's Meet limits to 140 characters per message you send as well. And can that help students? Can that help students figure out how do you say something concisely in 140 characters? It may help them with paraphrasing if they have to try to paraphrase something in that amount of time. So let's talk about a little bit some of these tools that are out there. And first I'm going to bring up Twitter, and I'm going to talk about Twitter more so for you all using it for professional development. You can definitely use it with students as well, but what we're going to talk about it this month, and our guest speaker is as well, is how you can use it for professional development or to enhance things in your classroom. So this is basically what Twitter looks like. This is my Twitter feed. And on the right-hand side, you can see items from people who I follow, items that they have posted. If something has a picture with it, often it shows up where you see a tiny bit of the picture, and you can click expand to see even more of it. But what you do is you start following people, and then when they tweet, their tweets show up on the right-hand side of the page. And when people follow you, then your tweets will show up on their page like that. Now, to use this for professional development, there's a lot of things people are putting out there. I follow mostly librarians, teachers, and then authors and book people, because those are my interests. And when it comes to librarians and teachers, they share a lot of great things. So the top item, she shared how she used Skype with students in mystery locations, and so there she linked to a story all about that, and I thought that was really kind of an interesting story. So you can get ideas of how you could use some of these things in your classroom. Or you get things like the bottom one where they said 13 unbelievable innovations that are happening now, and they link out to an article talking about new technologies, and I find all of that really fascinating. So I find these things as I'm looking through my feed. And all of these screenshots I saw all of these within 1 hour on my Twitter feed. So I just whenever I go into Twitter, I don't go back, from the last time I looked at Twitter. I usually just go back an hour and then see what I can find. So all of these items I found just by going back an hour on my feed. So these next ones, the top one, I thought that was really interesting that there were some open source fonts that can help people with dyslexia. So I thought that was really interesting that there's a whole page where you can get fonts that can be better for people with dyslexia. So you find interesting things. If you see something interesting, put it out on Twitter, because when I see people put things interesting like that, it really adds value for me. And the bottom article then, I thought was an interesting article with all of our snow days and things, that lower income students, they can be hungry days as well. So that was a good article talking about that. Then conferences. Twitter is used a lot at conferences, and they'll have a hashtag. The hashtag, excuse me, is it has a pound symbol, and then it says METC14, so right here. That's a hashtag. When you put a pound symbol in front of a word, it turns it into a link. And if everyone uses that hashtag for the conference, when you click on that link, you would see all the tweets that have that hashtag. So that's, for me, my favorite thing to do at conferences. And my favorite thing to look at is that, because I basically see the notes other people take when they're in a session. I don't ever write my notes out at a conference. I don't ever use a note-taking application at a conference. I use Twitter. When there's something I don't want to forget, I tweet about it with the hashtag. And then people who are not at the conference can see things that I see, or people who are at the conference but in a different session can see what I have said about something. I love doing that at a conference, and so I put that tweet in showing that a lot of people were at this conference tweeting a bunch of different things. And then down at the bottom, what you can do with Twitter is when you start getting a following, you can start asking questions to people. So she put a question out there wanting to know, what app should I use for early literacy? And she had a lot of people reply to her and give her examples of apps you could use. And then, of course, you can start following things that are just of interest to you. I follow news organizations as well, like Slate. So Slate will put out the latest news. On the top right, I follow its MSP traffic. And I look at that before I go anywhere, if I'm going to be on the interstates, to see if there's any accidents. MSP traffic is really great about alerting you to traffic accidents. And then I follow a lot of libraries, and libraries post things about books and literacy and education and technology. So here Ramsey County posted a funny website about finding your Shakespearean soulmate. And then I like to follow Gallicat. They are all about book publishing news. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that they tweeted out. So you also want to follow things that are just of interest to you as well. And this is one that I thought was, I follow IO9. They post a lot of stuff about sci-fi and fantasy, so they had a great graphic on Marvel heroes. But that's, again, just something of my interest, because you also want to make Twitter fun for yourself, too. Now, our guest speaker is going to come in and talk about how she uses it for professional development, how she's connected with authors, how it's really transformed some things in her library and in classrooms. And she has a great presentation. I saw her presentation at a conference and asked her if she would come do it for you all. So you'll learn more about Twitter from her, of how to best utilize it. And when we meet, I will show you how to use Twitter. So we're going to dive more into it when we meet. We're also going to dive into today's meet. Now, today's meet is something I would recommend you use with your students if you want all of them to take notes together, or if you want them to kind of ask questions in an online forum. Today's meet is so incredibly simple. It requires no accounts, no passwords, nothing like that. All you do is go to today's meet, you name your room, you choose how long the room will be available. You can have it be available for just 2 hours, for 1 week, for a month, or up to 2 years. So you create your room, and then you just give people the link to go to. Your room will be todaysmeet.com/whatever you name it. So if I were to make one for Millie, it would be todaysmeet.com/Millie. And that's the link I would give people to enter the room. So you don't tell students to go to todaysmeet.com. You tell them to go to todaysmeet.com/ the name of your room. And when they get there, all they do is enter their name to enter the room. And when they're in the room, it looks like this, and they just type their message in the blue box and it shows up on the left. Most recent messages show up at the top. This is all it looks like. It's a very, very simple tool, but it's a great tool to get students into to have them have discussions. People have used today's meet in classrooms in multiple ways. You could have, when you're giving a presentation to the class, you could have them in today's meet taking notes about your presentation or in there asking questions. You could have the same thing when a student is giving a presentation, have all the other students be in the room. Or this works really well when you kind of do the fishbowl thing in your classroom, where you have maybe 3 to 5 students in the center of the room having a discussion, and the other students all on the outside of the room watching the discussion. And those on the outside of the room are just supposed to watch and listen to the discussion. But instead of having them do that, get them in a today's meet room where they could then type out what they're learning about the discussion or any info they would want to add to the discussion. So it really keeps them engaged while this is going on. Even though they're not part of the discussion in the center of the fishbowl, they're still engaged by interacting online. Another thing that people have students do is when you watch a video in class, all the students go in a today's meet room and take notes about what they're learning in the video or ask questions about what they're learning in the video. So there's a lot of ways you can use chat rooms to do things like that. And those are just some of the ways people use today's meet. Another chat application that we probably won't get into, I just want to show you what this looks like though. This is Simple Meet, and this is just as easy as today's Meet in that you don't have to create an account or have a password. What you do is you just, you as the teacher would come to the home page and you'd use the blue box that said Start Chat, and you see you have a number. what you do is give students that number, and you tell them to go to this website and go to the green box and type in the number. You also get a link to your chat as well, so you could also give them a link. But I think just giving them the number and telling them to type that number in the green box is a pretty easy way to get them in the chat. And then this one looks like this. When they enter the chat, they would enter their name, and then when they type, it shows up on the left for them, and then they see everyone else's info on the right. So this is also a really simple tool. One advantage this has to today's Meet is that if you type your email address in the chat log box, you can actually get a transcript of the chat after it's all done. You get a transcript from when you entered the chat to when you left the chat. You don't get that in today's Meet, although you can just copy and paste a today's Meet chat and put it in a Word document as well. Now, one thing if you start using this with students is you want to give them guidelines before you even begin. And you have to allow, when they first get into the chat room, for them to kind of play around and mess around with it. I have to allow that for when I use it with you all, that you're going to make some jokes at first, you're going to say hello to everybody. The first time you get into it, you have to allow for a little bit of that. But you do want to, before you even get them in the room, you do want to go over some guidelines. You know, are you going to grade what they type? Do they have to use proper grammar, or can they use things like LOL? If they're taking notes, they need to put a Q there if they're quoting from something. Do they have to participate? And then, of course, the big one is if there's a misuse of the tool, what is going to be the consequence? Is it going to be done for everyone in the class or just that student? And you have to carry through with the misuse of those guidelines. And I know you know all of this, but it doesn't hurt to remind you that before you try using a new tool like this, make sure to have clear guidelines for all the students in the class. And if you are going to grade it, there are some rubrics you can find online for how to grade chat participation. So there's the chat rubric that could be just as simple as this. But I did link to an article that I got out of the Elm databases that talked about other rubrics you could use for chat discussions. So if you need help with making a rubric, if you're going to grade some of this, look at some of those things I have in the Millie Wiki. And I already talked a little bit about this too, but when it comes to microblogging and chat, can it help some of those students see each other's notes, especially since we know students don't capture everything in their own notes? Can seeing what other students type really help them? And then another thing that we always think too is that using some of these tools in the classroom can help students how they could use these tools in education. You know, sometimes we hear from students that, you know, my computer, my iPad, that's for fun. It's not for school. But if we use some of these tools in the classroom, maybe they can figure out how they could use it for school and education. So when we meet, we're going to use Twitter and today's Meet. And we also are going to have our guest speaker, Laura Given. She is LibLaura5 on Twitter. When we all get our Twitter accounts, we will all follow LibLaura5. And she tweets really great things that she's doing in her classroom or in the library. So she's a good one to follow. And she'll be a really great speaker for when we meet. But we will go over how to use Twitter and how to use today's Meet, and then we'll hear from Laura about how she's used it. So that's what our day will consist of on February 24th. And then next month we will go over copyright as well as some of the things for March. So that's all for today. So go kind of explore some of those note-taking applications, explore Twitter or today's Meet, and then when we meet in person, we will explore them all together. And don't forget to write a blog post about this video and what you learned. I'll see you soon.